Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning or this evening, depending on where you are dialing in from. It's good to have you with us. I'm just going to share my screen, so we've got some slides. So yeah, as you're joining, we'd love for you to share in the Q&A. Actually, I think it's in the Q&A function. Share what's your role, and if you can, share one word to describe your culture today. We'd love to get a sense of what's important to you, where you're at in terms of culture, and that will help us frame our conversation today. So yeah, feel free to add that into the Q&A as you're joining. And hopefully this is why you've joined. This is the session that you're expecting. So today we're going to be exploring this topic. So from fuzzy to fuel, and we're going to be sharing a practical formula for culture-driven growth. And our commitment to you all today is that we're going to have an interactive discussion. I've got two great guests with me who I will introduce to you very shortly. And we want to leave you with some practical ideas and initial steps that you can take to help you turn culture from something that feels quite fuzzy to something that you feel can fuel sustainable growth for people and for organizations. So let's crack on. And if anyone's just joining, feel free to add into the chat your answers to these questions. So your role and one word to describe your culture today. And we'll have a look at those shortly. And let me go ahead and introduce ourselves and the guests that I have joining me this morning. So for those that I haven't met, I'm Sarah McLellan. I'm the founder and author of Make It Human. My background is I'm a work psychologist, and I've spent around 20 years working with organizations through consulting work and also leading teams. And culture has been a constant theme and something that I've always found really interesting. And through that work, I believe that there is a formula that we can put in place to shape cultures where people thrive, but also businesses grow sustainably too. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some of those thoughts and insights with you today. I'm delighted to be joined by two brilliant chief people officers. I wanted to bring in some voices of people who are doing this live, who are shaping culture across different organizations every day. And so I was delighted when Sarah and Jonny said, yes, I'll come and join you and we can talk about that topic. So Sarah, let me turn to you. Do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So, hi everyone. Really lovely to be here. So I've been working in HR now for just over 20 years. A lot of the experience that I've had has been in high growth environments. So change and transformation have sort of become real sort of part and parcel of day-to-day life. I've worked in kind of global corporate publicly owned businesses, worked in a really crazy startup, which was quite the experience, and also in private equity backed businesses too. So I actually decided to make the move from permanent to interim and fractional roles this year. So 2025 is absolutely been a learning experience for me. What I'm really passionate about, though, is creating workplaces where people can thrive and really just feel that they belong. I think ultimately I want people to be the best version of themselves that they can be. And I just think that's a real win-win because as businesses grow and become more successful, people do as well.
Fabulous. Thank you, Sarah. And we've worked together previously in an organisation, and I can attest to all of that. Like that people focus is always there in the work that you're doing. So thank you for joining us this morning. And Jonny, let me hand to you to introduce yourself.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. Great to be here. So my name's Jonny Friedman. I work as the Chief People Officer for FIECON. FIECON are a professional services organization specializing in life sciences and health economics, supporting large pharmaceuticals, biotech, medical techs to help effectively for them to launch their drugs into market. We have literally been, we've very recently been acquired. We're now PE backed. and I've worked in a number of PE-backed organisations across my career. I've not always been in HR. I've done a lot of operations work as well, and I think that has helped me understand kind of the key, in terms of business commercials and making sure that we're adding value. And that I really believe passionately that culture and value go hand in hand. But the key thing is about how do you portray that and get that narrative across to the business in a way that they understand.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think certainly in our conversations that always comes through, Jonny, the culture, the people, the business value proposition coming together. And yeah, great to have you joining us this morning. I don't know whether either of you are actually able to see the Q&A and see if there's, or the chat. Are we getting a sense of who's joining us and types of roles or where their culture's at all?
Yes, very much so. So we've got quite a few OD specialists as well.
Okay.
All who are, there's some interesting kind of contrasts on the culture side. So I love how Jenny has said that fuzzy fits, and Leah said it's curious. But also one anonymous user has said that their culture is competitive. Quite curious about that as well.
Interesting.
And we've also got people from the charity sector as well. And we also have a structural engineer as well, Stephen. So that's quite an interesting kind of dimension to this chat.
Different perspectives. Okay, and fuzzy fits. So yeah, I mean that's good because that was kind of our shared starting point. So thank you both, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you as we progress. And I know you've got some different perspectives and experiences to share, which I think will be incredibly valuable to those joining us today. So our plan today is to help you take your first steps. So moving from fuzzy to fuel, and we're going to explore some of the things that are holding us back in terms of shaping culture. And we're going to share some ideas and a formula for making culture feel more focused and more manageable. As we progress, feel free to use that Q&A function, and we'll see how many of the questions we can get to. If we don't, I'm sure we can follow up with you afterwards as well. So do enter any of your thoughts into the Q&A as we progress. So let's get started. And actually, the starting point is pretty good. 75%, and I suspect it's probably higher now, of leaders have improving culture as their top priority. So there's a lot of desire, there's a lot of good intent, and there's a lot of recognition that culture is important and a key lever to pull. However, what we see is that only 51% of leaders or employees only see about 51% turning that into any action. So the first challenge that we have is that there is a gap to close. And what we'd love to do is to hear from you, first of all, in terms of what you think makes culture hard to change. So why is it hard to cross that chasm from I'd like to do something, but it doesn't necessarily always turn into tangible, real action? And perhaps it's one of these things. Maybe it's a lack of time. Maybe it's not feeling you have the right skills. Perhaps it's about not feeling equipped to get buy-in or struggling to get buy-in. Or maybe it's around not necessarily understanding what good looks like, the models, or being able to prove ROI. So perhaps you can take a moment to share your thoughts in the Q&A, and maybe it's something else altogether. But yeah, what makes culture feel hard to change? How do we what gets in the way of us crossing that chasm? And whilst those thoughts are coming in, Sarah, I thought we'd come to you first because I know you are working as an interim CPO, so joining lots of different organisations, and very often, I'm sure, culture is top of the list. We want to improve our culture. So you've got to find ways to make quick action to get started on that journey. So perhaps you could share with us how you're able to overcome some of those obstacles and find your first step.
Yeah, I think what I'm learning certainly in the interim world is speed. So the expectation is that you can come in and read the culture really quickly, and also build some trust. So one of the things that I do, first of all, just to get a good understanding of culture, is just try and do a quick culture diagnostic. So typically, if there's data available, that's really helpful. So I'll look at exit interviews, engagement surveys, look at reward systems and mission, vision, values. But what I find really helpful actually is doing lots of listening and observing. So those one-to-one chats with people at all different levels of the business, because that helps me understand what's working and what isn't. And you just get a really good sense of that lived experience. So what's it like to work here on a good day and a bad day? And I also find it fascinating just watching those daily dynamics and interactions, because that really tells you how decisions are really made, how people typically like to sort of communicate, and how you actually, what behavior actually gets rewarded. So that's always my starting point. And then in terms of the improvements, as an interim, I'm not necessarily going to be there for a really long time. So it's my role to just nudge it in the right direction and help people to get started. So one of the key things that I do is not to forget to recognise and celebrate the good stuff, because it's rare that I've been in a business where there isn't good things about the culture, and you want to make sure that you keep those elements, and it's important to call them out. But I think for me, just starting small really kind of makes it feel much more manageable. So that might be some quick wins, that might be some small experiments, just to get things started, because I think it shows you haven't got to spend like loads of time, loads of resources, loads of money, and skills to actually start to make those day-to-day improvements in there. And sometimes that's much easier than these big kind of programs that people typically default to. And they might be amazing, but trying to get traction can be really tough there. So there's some of the things that I do. But I think if I was answering actually this poll, I'd probably say buy-in can be one of the most tricky obstacles, often that leadership buy-in. Because they can be such a mixed group. You can have leaders that are really on board, leaders that just don't see the value in culture, and the ones that sort of sit in the middle and might smile and nod and sort of say all the right things that aren't necessarily active there. So one of the things that I tend to do is to really try and make that link with the business context and performance to culture, and understand that what's in it for them, so that there's really that sort of clear intention. And just make sure that they're singing from the same hymn sheet, because so often you might try and think, right, I'm there with the buy-in, and then they're going to say something completely different out to their teams, and that's so confusing. So that makes it a real obstacle to get anything started if you've got some really different and conflicting messages. So yeah, as I say, overall, try and get a good sense as quickly as you can. Use the data, use your observation, and then definitely start small with some experiments and some quick wins.
Yeah, I love that. I think the starting small, and also the as you said, the buy-in part, we often think that we've got to go big. So we've got this is culture. So leadership, we need to get their sign off to get going. And actually, as you're describing brilliantly, sometimes it's finding the small step, it's finding the experiment and proving it before you go back round that loop and saying, here's some evidence, here's why it works. I'm not sure if that is what's coming through in the chat around themes. Is it buy-in, or are there other things that are emerging as blockers?
There's definitely buy-in is definitely looking at that. I think the overriding theme is complexity of the organisation, and also kind of how focusing on the commercial takes priority, and how you connect the two. And the irony of all ironies is that I certainly find is that when people explain what the business challenges are, and you look in terms of like the root cause of why those challenges exist internally, a lot of them come down to culture. A lot of them come down to the way teams collaborate with each other, or the lack of collaboration. And kind of it's what we've got to get better at is being able to prove the measurability and the link between our behaviour and how that translates to business results. So I think that is coming through very, very strongly on this chat.
Thank you both. Yeah, and I think that really resonates, that very often we're seeing culture as something separate to the running of the business, the performance of the business, and it therefore gets put in this box of, oh, it's too complex, it's too fuzzy, we can't get aligned on it, when actually, as Sarah's outlining, there's a few small steps that we can take that will help us unlock some of that. And as you say, Jonny, that is what is going to power you get people collaborating, working together, innovating. That's going to power our performance. So bringing that together is the opportunity that we often have. So let me move us on in the story. And unfortunately, the challenges that we face in that crossing the chasm from I want to do something to actually doing something means that very often, from a culture point of view and across workplaces, actually we get stuck in this doom loop. So because we're not necessarily connecting culture with the broader business performance and that being the lever that we need to pull, what we revert to is I need to deliver this output and I need to deliver it now. So we start monitoring very specific behaviors. People then perform to those metrics. So actually this model comes from a piece of research that came out last year in MIT Sloan Management, and it was about return to office mandates. But I think it has broader applicability. However, the RTO piece, you can see, if you say, right, well, you've got to be in the office 3 days a week, you're without giving broader context, broader rationale, or making, good reason for people to come in, you're going to encourage that perform to metrics type behavior. So badge swiping, just turn up, but actually I'm not going to do much else while I'm here because I'm here. I've done what you asked me to do, because that's driving this loss of trust and reduced performance. So we do find ourselves getting stuck in this doom loop. And what that's doing is fueling this emotion. So those who have watched Inside Out 2 will be familiar with this scene where this character takes over of the console that's controlling the lead character's brain. And you can see the impact of anxiety. When our brains and our bodies are flooded with anxiety, it's so hard to do anything other than, survive and get through that next moment. And this doom loop is very much what it pushes people towards. And what we find is that doom loop then leads to this culture drag. So because we're stuck in this cycle of we've got to perform, so therefore do this, do that, and we're eroding trust and creating anxious people, we're building this experience of workplaces. So I've pulled together just a few stats. There's lots out there, but just giving us a sense of what it feels like across workplace cultures around the globe. So we're struggling to make social connection a priority and make it a reality. Only 20% of people say that they have a friend at work. Most employees, so 91%, are saying that they've experienced high pressure or stress at some point this year. And that's, you don't have to think too hard to perhaps see that in yourself or see that in people around you. The always on nature of work, the competing demands, it's really hard to find boundaries and really shut down. And what that's resulting in is that only a third of employees are saying that they're thriving in their lives overall. And this collectively is creating this drag on us as individuals, as humans, in teams, in organizations, and in society. And Gallup estimated that this drop in engagement and thriving is costing our economies over $400 billion a year in lost productivity. So it really is creating this drag that we need to address. And Jonny, I know you talked about value earlier. That was one of the things that you shared in your intro. And I know that, as you said, you're navigating culture change on quite a different level at the minute in integrating 5 different companies. Not everyone always gets that opportunity. I'll frame it as an opportunity. And I'm sure that requires a lot of convincing of stakeholders, of aligning of stakeholders and buy-in, as Sarah was highlighting as one of the issues. So I'd love to hear from you what you're finding helps get culture prioritized and critically actually turned into some tangible actions.
Sure. Well, it's not easy. I can certainly vouch for that. I think it's got to start with myself, and working out what kind of leader I want to be. And very much my philosophy is all around servant leadership. So my role here is to serve the people that deliver in the organization, so my colleagues, the board, And then also thinking about kind of who we do it all for, which is our customers, right? And thinking really, really clearly about those kind of key stakeholders. I think that one of the key things is my mode is to be as transparent as I possibly can. I find that level of authenticity breeds trust, and if you have the trust, then you can get the teamwork to go with it. So transparency, trust, and teamwork. And it's not only the teamwork that exists within my own people team, but it's the teamwork that exists between my people team and all the other teams. And as you were saying earlier, you have to start small. You can't go big, but if you can role model it and go small, and it's amazing how kind of these little micro behaviors can build momentum, and that momentum then ripples out more widely, and then all of a sudden you started to create something that people want to be part of. So I think that's probably the first thing. The second thing is then ultimately it comes down to being able to measure those behaviors and be able to kind of measure progress. One of the things that we've done in our business, and I've done it wherever I've been actually, is do two main things. So number one is, if you don't already have it, is to have employee surveys, and to have really, really clear, well thought through employee surveys where you can get measurable and kind of tangible feedback, and then launch a campaign of "you said, we did," because then that builds the trust that you've actually taken the time to listen, consider, and then respond with that. The other thing that we're doing in our business right now is that we're building employee forums within each of the 5 legacy organizations. So that way, it's helping people to let go of the old world, but also to be very, very solution focused about what what the challenges are right now. It's not designed to be a kind of a militant kind of workers union or anything like that. They're meant to be really, really positive, focused, can do, and we want to be part of the solution for you. So that's taken a lot of engineering, but they're now working in play. And then the third thing is putting those two things together. The third thing is understanding the return on investment of those activities and what's the value of that. And some of the examples of value, come down to kind of how much repeat business are you getting from customers, what's the customer voice saying, what's the feedback you're getting on things like Glassdoor, what are your exit interviews telling you that Sarah was talking about before, and then also kind of other key metrics like attrition, absence, and then also, perhaps most importantly in this day and age, is your talent data, kind of your top talent. Are they staying? Are they connected to the purpose, mission, and vision of the organization? And have they got something that's personal to them that's keeping them well and truly kind of connected with the business, and that there's meaning for them in their role?
Yeah.
So that's some of the things that certainly we're thinking about right now.
Fabulous. Thank you. Yeah, I love that. And I love how trust with all of those stakeholders is the key currency. So, the listening, and Sarah, you were mentioning that earlier, but the trust breaks if you listen, but don't, as you say, Jonny, you don't share back and say, so this is what we're doing, you say we did. But equally with your stakeholders who you need to get their buy-in, their support, you've also got to build trust by using their language and their metrics that matter to them. So proving, as you both said, in sort of small experiments, in small steps, this is where we're heading and this is the impact, and bringing everyone with you. So not being done to, but we're part of this, and collating their ideas. So yeah, some fabulous insights. Thank you. I wondered are there any questions or comments in the chat that we want to bring in at this stage?
I can't see any, Sarah.
Okay, fab. We will press on. Thank you. So we've started to look at our intent to change, and then explore, with Jonny and Sarah's help, some of the things they're getting in the way, and then sharing some insights around how we can build buy-in. But there's some other things that we wanted to highlight around where we tend to go wrong, and critically, how we can turn that into, and how we can use a formula for success. So in terms of fuel for humans, there's actually a lot that we know about what we need as human beings to thrive, to grow. There's hundreds of years of research across all sorts of different disciplines that really will boil down to us being at our best when we can experience these three things. So autonomy, that we've got a sense of control, of agency, of choice over our lives, our work, is so important to us. Meaning, both in terms of feeling that our work is meaningful, that it connects to a broader purpose, but also in terms of meaningful connections with other people. We are social creatures, we're social beings. We want to feel part of something. And as we've seen earlier, that's one of the challenges that we're facing right now in our more dispersed and digitized ways of working. And then finally, growth, feeling that we're going somewhere, that we're learning, that we're changing, and this is a place where we can access support and feel inspired. So we do know that there is a recipe for success. However, very often, and I'm sure lots of you will be able to relate to this, work can feel like this. So those things, those three things get buried and lost under waiting for decisions and perhaps not knowing who is making that decision or why or when. Quite often we struggle to find meaning in the tasks that we're asked to do, and sometimes they are wrapped up in that doom loop of just do this, just get that done. I just need you to do that, or I'd like you to come here and do this. And so therefore we struggle to find that connection, struggle to make it meaningful. And for very many people, our days look like this, back-to-back meetings. And it's hard to find space to do focused work, to find meaning and connection, or to collaborate, to problem solve with groups of people, because our diaries look like just a sea of meetings. So we think the first shift that we need to make is from work and culture feeling fuzzy, in that it just happens around us, to being more intentional in how we shape the conditions that enable us to fuel human growth. And at Make It Human, that's what we're really focused on. So how do we create conditions where people can thrive, considering those three key ingredients that we know help us bring out the best in ourselves? And this is a model that we've developed through our own experiences, research, and also looking at different organizations that have developed brilliant cultures where people can grow, but also some that have failed. So where it's gone wrong, because there's some real lessons to learn through that. And what we find is that there are 5 key ingredients. And when we put these in place, people are much more likely to feel that they can grow, that they can thrive, and then they bring their best to that organization. So I'll give you just a quick snapshot. So workplace is the first element, and that's really about the conditions that we're creating, so the environment, the tools, but it's also about feeling that you have flexibility, that you can create balance, you can switch off when you need to. Accountability is more about understanding what good looks like, having clarity, which is one of the big challenges right now when work feels so murky and everything feels like a priority. But yeah, being clear on how you contribute is so important. Community, we want to feel part of something. So organizations that are helping create social connection, encouraging collaboration, making people feel that they belong, that everyone is included, are really effective at shaping good communities. Empowerment, so really cutting to that sense of autonomy in terms of feeling trusted to do what's right. There's some boundaries, some guidelines created, but we create space for people to jump into that and find the path forward. And then finally, growth, around feeling that you can develop and grow here. There are opportunities. There are people who are looking out for you. You feel inspired. And then when we create those conditions, we're much more likely to get the best out of our individuals and our teams, and then build sustainable growth for our businesses. So, Jonny, I thought at this stage we'd come back to you, because I know this is a model that we've been looking at in the accelerator that you and Sarah are a part of. And it'll be great to hear from you what you've been learning about your culture, and obviously appreciating it's going through some change right now, using that lens. So using the lens of the five elements. What are you learning?
I think well, a couple of things spring to mind immediately. First of all, we've got the challenge now that we've got effectively 5 generations in our workplace. So the needs of and the conditions for human growth are each of those generations is different. So coming up with a people strategy and one for culture, it's really challenging to meet all those needs. So I think that that's really important. I think probably the thing that the silver bullet to try and address some of that, it's all about human connection. The world, I think we've talked about this before, haven't we, Sarah? But the world is becoming more polarized. Sometimes it feels like maybe it's a darker place sometimes, and kindness and connection and kind of the human connection goes a long way and makes such a difference to people. It really does, both kind of the power of the human connection for individuals face to face, but also in terms of the business's overall purpose as well. Having a connection to that purpose really matters. And I think that's really important. I think when it comes to the workplace, the fact is that there's no one size fits all when you're asking people when you're trying to work out kind of should everybody come into the office, should everybody work remotely, do you have a hybrid? Everybody's got a personal schedule, and I found that having kind of the opportunity to build in at least some personal flexibility really matters to people, so that people can kind of work. Life gets in the way, and we need to acknowledge that and accept that and support that. So by enabling that to happen, I think that's really important. I think the other thing that really matters with 5 generations, 5 different sets of ambitions, is that within the growth kind of aspect is having multiple career paths, multiple opportunities for growth, whether that's linear, whether that's lateral growth. All that it's about kind of how does the job become more meaningful, and how do you learn more and more as you go on. I think that's really important. And then probably the final thing is around accountability, which is driving a really good culture involves line managers and senior managers and leaders having really clear direction and being able to give that clear direction and cascade it to their teams, because teams need that. Teams need to know where they're going. Businesses are usually very complex, very messy, and having some direction and having a leader that kind of tells them or helps them to navigate where they're going through in a very kind of supportive culture is definitely kind of a big strength to have.
Yeah, and interesting. I think, accountability tends to be where we often struggle to make that a reality, and in a way that we're comfortable with, and it feels fair. But yeah, really interesting to hear, in particular, your reflections on, yes, that's what work is about now. We've got so many different diverse groups of people, and you talk about 5 generations, but there are still shared drivers, shared needs. So outlining the need for connection, the need for purpose, but how do we create that across people with quite different perspectives and different priorities in their lives right now. So yeah, thank you for bringing that to life, Jonny. And we wanted to ask you
Sarah,
as well. Yes.
sorry,
Go on,
Sarah, to
Sarah.
interrupt. We
Yeah.
do have a question.
Yes.
So just whilst we've still got Jonny there, so I think it's a really good question, Jonny. It's how are you building the power of connection at FIECON with hybrid working?
Great question. Yeah.
It's a good question, and a difficult question as well, Inez. So thank you for that. Look, it's not easy. One of the things that we encourage our leaders to do is, when we have a more remote team, is that we get the leader and the team come into the office on an agreed day of the week, and usually kind of we organise breakfast at the office, kind of perhaps half an hour or the first half an hour of the day, just to catch up and kind of have a chat over breakfast, or even to have kind of a face-to-face kind of team meeting as well. But the importance of getting people in front of each other is so important, because it's, I've noticed, I speak to, there are some people that I speak to every single day, over Teams, over Google Meet, and yet when I meet them face to face, it feels different. It's something. It's difficult to kind of. It's a bit intangible, isn't it? But it is really, really important that you do both. You've got to, kind of when you are remote, you've got to keep talking all the time, keep updating, keep checking that everybody's aligned, keep making sure that everybody's going in the right direction. But getting that face-to-face time is also really important. Doing it informally as well as formally.
We've also just had a comment in as well. So, the comment just saying, what a great point about the sort of 5 generations, Jonny. And then just a sort of a comment in terms about the post-COVID hybrid work approach, sort of potentially eroding the investment that senior members of the team naturally provided to early careers people. So it's not necessarily advocating everyone's got to be in the office at all times, but it feels a bit more individual focused rather than team focused.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important observation, Stephen. And kind of it's interesting, kind of the kind of generally speaking, the more senior members of the team, kind of they have as they move towards the later phases of their career, their desire to support and help others it becomes a more and more important priority for them, and the ability to be able to give them that opportunity to help mentor and support some our newer, more inexperienced colleagues is extremely important as well. So I think that's a really good point, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sarah, for bringing that in. I think actually it leads us quite nicely to the second part where we're going to talk about intentionality, like being intentional because of that shift of not all being under the same roof. We've got to be intentional. We've got to create meaningful connection. Not just come in, but come in and interact with your colleagues or do something that's going to provide value. At this point, we also wanted to ask you which of the 5 elements you feel your culture is best at shaping. So which areas, I know you've just heard a sort of snapshot, but if you kind of do a high level thought on what are we actually quite good at today in our culture? And we'll come back to that in a moment. So if you want to type that in to the Q&A. And the good news is, there is some good news. When we deliberately shape conditions for people to grow, for humans to grow, we move to the other side of the doom loop, which is the boom loop, because what we're doing is starting to lift our focus, so move out of the kind of control and micromanagement tactics that we might rely on, and we talk more broadly about outcomes. Then we start to create space for autonomy and flexibility, so people feel, oh, I can come up with my own ideas around how I need to meet this. I know it's important, I understand the purpose, I understand the meaning, but here's some ideas. And critically what that does, and I think this has been a key theme already, is it helps us to increase trust and engage employees and drive performance. So I think a great kind of visual for summarising the shift that we need to make. And people who feel trusted are 2 times more productive. So that's really what we're able to unlock when we focus on building trust, on giving people space, on encouraging autonomy and flexibility. That's what we unlock. That's the prize. And I might just come back, Sarah. I don't know if we had any. What were the themes at all in the 5 elements? Anything standing out?
We've got accountability and community so far.
Okay, they're the ones that are standing out. Interesting. Yeah, accountability, as I said, is one that often companies struggle with, teams struggle with, because it's a bit harder. But yeah, so maybe we can see if there are other ideas being shared around how they're doing that. I'd love to learn more. So let's move on to the second and final shift for today, which is around then how do we make this a reality? And this very much, I think, involves becoming much more focused and specific in what we're doing with culture and how we're shaping it. And that's because very often culture feels like this. It swirls around us. It's dynamic, it's changing. It's also incredibly complex because really, it's everything. It's everything about how we work, where we work, who we work with, what gets prioritized. But equally, it very often feels intangible because people talk about culture in terms of how they feel, their thoughts, their feelings, their beliefs. And so people get scared of it because it's, oh, I can't, how do I influence that? I can't see it. I can't pinpoint it. But what we do know, and repeatedly the research tells us this, is that it's incredibly powerful. And there's one piece of research that I think really sums this up brilliantly, is that people are over 10 times more likely to leave an organization because of an experience of toxic culture than because of what they're paid. So that's what we need to invest in. That's what we need to unlock, and the prize, the outcome, is really clear. So how do we do that? So at Make It Human, we help simplify and make culture more tangible. But we start by saying, actually, we need to acknowledge that it does often feel unconscious. It's an unconscious shaping of our beliefs, our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. But we can get more specific about what is shaping that. And we use this culture triangle to help us make it more tangible. So we look at the environment that we're in. What does that say? What messages does it send? What cues does it present? We look at the behaviours that get tolerated and rewarded, so the kind of positive and the dark side as well. And in particular, we explore the habits because they're quite small, tangible, everyday things that are actually quite quick levers to identify and change. So there are ways that we can make culture feel more tangible. And this is exactly what some of the best workplaces out there are doing. They're doing these two things. They're being intentional in shaping conditions for human growth, and they're being very focused in how they bring that to life. So through looking at the environment, the habits, the behaviors that they're shaping. And this is an extract from something that we call the growth culture habit wall. So it's got a few organizations and just some of the activities, the habits, the behaviors that they're putting in place to help them make this a reality. And I'll just pull out a couple to share with you. So Dropbox, like lots of organizations, actually have introduced a no meeting Wednesday. And that's because they acknowledge this always on, always in meetings habit that we have, and they wanted to break it so that people feel they can do more focused work. They can engage in purposeful and meaningful work. Canva have a very strong focus on building a coaching and feedback-led culture. So they use coaching conversations to help people surface misalignments. So building skills around coaching and having coaching conversations is a key part of their culture. And IKEA, you might have heard of this one, they have banana cards. So they encourage people to share wild ideas or try things by saying you've got permission to make a mistake. You could slip up on the banana skin. I really like that visual way of saying, look, let's create some psychological safety around this because we know it's important to how we grow. And Sarah, I'd love to bring you back in here to this part of the conversation, because shaping growth habits is a key part of the conversation that we've been having on the accelerator. And I wondered if you could share an example of a habit that you've identified that has helped you nudge a culture towards growth.
I think there's some really great examples actually on the slide. I do like that IKEA one in particular. But
Yeah.
I've seen in one business actually, they had a sort of a monthly 1 hour learning gathering. So a bit like a lunch and learn, but I've often found lunch and learns whilst you're eating your sandwich can be a little bit more passive and kind of absorbing information. But what I really liked about this one was it was much more active. So each month there was a different topic that was chosen by employees, and it was rotated. So there'll be a different person that would host it. And it might be about learning a skill. It might be about a topical issue like, say, AI or DEI. It might have a business impact. But the nice thing about it was that it didn't matter whether you were a leader, a manager, or an employee. For that 1 hour, there was just that dedicated time and space where everyone was focused around brainstorming, collaborating, learning something together. And it just sort of gave that sort of slightly different freedom and sort of evened up the playing field a bit. So I thought that was a really nice one that worked well. And I've seen at a team level, some teams do things like unplugged days. Where you kind of need that bit of space. It might be for a couple of hours or half a day. And it's quite personalised. So you can pick whether it's a skill or just some time for your own well-being. So it talks to some of those conditions that you were introducing earlier, around trying to have a bit of a switch off for a while and just that sense of community. And I just think they work well because they're quite straightforward to do and to put in place. But again, it's small, but they have that lasting impact and they get that momentum to continue through.
Yeah, great example. And I think it shows it's not enough just to say, well, let's meet up and talk about something that we might learn from. We have to be more intentional. We have to be more deliberate in, so who's going to speak? How are we going to run this? How do we make this feel inclusive and that people are able to learn, but also use it as a way to develop their skills as well, because there's that opportunity too. As you said, there's lots of good examples out there. I was actually reading about one just yesterday at BHP Billiton, the mining company. The CEO there has introduced a habit that is focused around asking people to provide feedback. So I think it's sort of digitally driven. It's a quick questionnaire that people complete about the effectiveness of the leader running the meeting. Which I thought, wow, that's quite interesting, because that's saying actually we want to really hold people to account for how they're running their meetings and using people's time, but also building that feedback muscle and openness around sharing those views. So we can be very deliberate and pointed in the behaviors, the habits that we're looking at, and habits I think are a really nice way of initiating some quick change. Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. And I wanted to quickly share with you all a little bit more about some of the learning programs that we run at Make It Human, all about helping you learn how to make growth a habit in your workplace. So you've got a bit of a taster today around some of the things that work around how we can get more focused, how we can get more intentional in shaping the right conditions. And we have two options for learning more and giving you skills and toolkits to do that in your own organization. So there's a virtual 3-hour masterclass, which is more suited if you're looking for tools, skills, and models that you can then take away and apply in your own organization. So it will give you a lot of that insight, stories to learn from organizations and leaders who have done this elsewhere, and then you can go away and apply that yourself. And in the accelerator, which is something Sarah and Jonny are currently part of, this is again virtual, but it's more cohort based. So you join with a small group across 8 weeks. And the focus here is more building your growth culture plan. So we use a set of canvases that help you delve into your culture. You're building skills, you're evaluating your culture as you go. And in many ways, you start applying that plan through going away and trying things and changing habits in the teams that you're running today. More suitable if you're looking to go deep on your culture and build a plan that you can start to implement straight away. And right now, as a special offer for those who have joined us today, you can take 10% off both of those options if you book your place before the end of November. So if you're looking to get culture on the agenda and make sure that you do it differently in 2026, this could be a great step for you. But equally, whether our learning programs are right for you or not, there are several things that you can do to help take your first step towards shaping a growth culture. And I'll share these with you all afterwards, so you'll get an email with links to each of these. But in terms of moving from fuzzy to fuel, you can take our growth culture scorecard, which will give you some personalized, quick insight into where your culture is today against those 5 elements. So we talked about those earlier, and some of you shared your thoughts on where you think your strengths are. You can get further information on that. Also, you can start using the culture triangle to help you get more focused and specific. So to make culture tangible. And again, I'll share with you some ideas for starting to use that. And as part of the Make It Human Club, you can access a whole library of tools, of stories. You can watch back some sessions. So basically giving you access to support as you're building your culture live, to learn and benefit from others' experiences and models. So all about making culture feel less fuzzy, more focused on fuel, more simple, and something that you can pick up and start today. So just before we close out, Jonny and Sarah, I wanted to come back to both of you and ask for your final thoughts, and perhaps you can share one piece of advice for those who are looking to take their first step, who want to turn that intention into action. What would you share? Maybe Sarah, should we start with you?
It's maybe going to be a little bit of a, excuse me, a repeat of what I've already said, but I think just start small. I think for me that's the key one, to get some momentum, to get some traction. And I think also don't forget to measure the impact of what you're doing, because you want to make sure it's actually making a difference. And hopefully it will. Sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. So I think the key thing is that measurement. And if it's not, it's that fail fast, learn fast piece. So you don't keep doing something that's not really going to make the difference. But 100% just small things, quick wins, small experiments, and get that momentum going.
Fabulous. Yeah, absolutely concur with that. Got to build the momentum, and the first step is where it starts. And Jonny, what would you share?
It definitely starts with you. Right, so it kind of the impact of your own actions, building that momentum, and I think as Simon Sinek talks about, getting those early adopters on board. If you get those early adopters, that's what builds the momentum. I think that here's something that perhaps a little bit more provocative, and we've not even discussed it on this call, but something that is fast approaching all of us, if it hasn't already, is AI. And I was on a webinar only an hour ago talking about kind of the importance of AI and how that's going to kind of become a major part of many organizations, if not all, over the next kind of few years and few months, and therefore culture plays an even bigger part in that, and understanding kind of how you can work alongside AI and get across the power of human connection, emotional intelligence, the things that AI cannot do, but you can support it and feed it with. I think that's going to be so important, and that is a future-based culture challenge that I thought I would just bring to people's attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Very timely. And yeah, it's all about change. I think many of us will be old enough to remember other technological advances and how that impacted and the what that imposed on our ways of working. And I would hope that we're starting to learn, actually, it doesn't really matter what the technology does. It's more about how we learn with it, how we grow with it as people and as teams. And that is, as you said, all about culture and change and trust, which was a big theme that we touched on today. So being focused on building trust as one of our or perhaps the big objective can unlock so much. So thank you all for joining, and thank you, Jonny and Sarah, for coming on and sharing your experiences and your advice. I think it really helps to have voices of people who are doing this live. So I really value your input, and I know the audience will too. And we hope that this has given you the audience, and we hope this has given you a flavour and some ideas about how we can choose to intentionally nurture conditions for human growth, and that actually we can make culture feel less fuzzy and more focused when we choose to. And finding that first step, as Sarah and Jonny have both mentioned, is so important. And actually, there's a lot that we can do as individuals. And we'd love to support you further. I'm sure both Sarah and Jonny will be really happy to carry on conversations if there are things that you want to ask. And likewise, I am too. And I will follow up with all of you with further information to help you find that first step and use some of the tools and learning insights that we have. So thank you ever so much for joining, and see you again soon.